Welcome to a true spiritual adventure story like the world has never known. Volume 2, Rise of the First World Teacher, with your host, Dr. James Yogadhi Weldon. Good day, this is Dr. Jim Weldon, Yogadhi, speaking to you from Heavenly Mountain, our community here in Boone, North Carolina, sharing my ongoing adventure, my autobiography of my journey to understand and experience the enlightened mind. The whole purpose of these works is really to provide some clarity for individuals that might be interested in what the nature of the divine is and how that can grow in our lives. This is actually the 21st episode in my second book. The first book is online, and I'd encourage anybody that's curious about looking a little deeper into the possibilities of human consciousness, begin to listen to those. As usual, in some of these episodes, I begin with a poem. This poem comes from one of the knowledge sheets that have been produced by the founder of the Art of Living. His name is Sri Sri Ravi Shankar. He is a world teacher, and certainly his organization is global, with literally tens of millions of individuals doing all kinds of good projects around the world in many, many parts of the world. Back in those early days when we began to meet with him each week, the summary of the knowledge would be shared with the world through a fax. We didn't have email at that time. As he would be traveling around, all the hundreds and at that point I guess thousands of centers around the world would eagerly look forward to a fax being sent to their homes. He would summarize the knowledge of the week. Those were later compiled into some really great books entitled Conversations with the Sincere Seeker. A river becomes the ocean. When a river meets the ocean, the river no longer remains a river. It becomes the ocean. A drop of the ocean is part of the ocean. In the same way, the moment a devotee meets and surrenders to the divine, the devotee becomes God, one with the divine. When the river meets the ocean, it can recognize that it is the ocean from the beginning to the end. So similarly, the individual I dissolves in the one big mind, the big divinity. And really everything that's happened with all of these episodes and my sharings is about how that process could happen. At least it happened in my life. From the very beginning of my life, as I passed through many of these experiences, quite frankly, I was quite overwhelmed by the process. I discovered that there is a heart to the world, or heart to life. And that heart to life was really a breathing existence, which in my experience really did contain all that's good in life. And you see that love and its amazing works in all the diversity of this world that we live in. You can see it in the eyes of a baby and the works of the saints from all traditions. And at a certain time in history, when the need is there, individuals arise that embody those divine qualities in order to bring in very unique and specific knowledge in all of the traditions of the world. And these are like the rose bushes, all of a sudden, that have occurred, risen in the deserts, that all of a sudden bloom. They're not talking about something different. They're talking about the same thing. But because individuals' points of view and understanding are different, these need to be explained differently. And the works of these and the songs and the poems of devotion and love that come out of us and out of such high beings, the heart, we could say, of the world and life is coming into a form. And if you met such a being, what would you say to them if you could really recognize them? Most people would not recognize because they're so focused in their individual activities, they would never realize that. And if life was a big drama, and this is what I'm sharing, what kind of adventures might come in really a short play, which we call an individual life, in that discovery. So everything that I've been doing, the works that I've done, are really an attempt to share my words and experiences coming into contact with my own grand heart, which also is connected in one with the heart of the world. And so as I was going through this whole process, I was seeking an outlet really to give an expression to an inner space that had come into my life, a beautiful, wonderful, loving, amazing space that I touched and gradually over time learned out to hold on to. And ultimately I drew it. I found out that I could hold on to it and it wouldn't go away. So what happens is when that inner experience begins to become established, one begins to pass through these higher states of consciousness. And these higher states of consciousness are the inevitable next stages of evolution. They may seem like they're so far off, but they're really inevitable in our evolution and growth. If we are taking advantage of the wisdom and the knowledge of these great beings when they come into the world, then rapid progress can take place. It may not always appear as rapid progress because we have to go through everyday living. You know, when I returned from India, in each trip that I made there, and after I spent time with the founder of the Art of Living and did my best to share the knowledge and teach the knowledge, that life began to come up in me. But the inner space that I was passing through and the experiences that were coming as part of that, there were really few people that I could talk about this. I had no outlet. Every now and then I would capture somebody. Those of you that perhaps know me, I would sit down in the latest process that maybe I was passing through, I would try to share. But I really didn't have an outlet. So the writing was really a way that I could give an outlet, and even this work, because this is a fundamental truth of knowledge and is really a real process that happened in me and is happening in everybody. I know that ultimately people will recognize that this is quite important because we need to understand the stages and steps of that so that we can be confident in the process. So on a deeper level, the sharing allowed me to free myself from what I passed through. And I believe maybe if I put it down on paper and this time we're able to explain it this way, at least I wouldn't forget it. And it could be preserved. And also some of the memories, just in the same way that you have something maybe negative that happens to you and it weighs on your mind and you want to take some time away, hopefully maybe at a retreat, getting away, taking a vacation can kind of free yourself from it. In a certain sense, those memories that I passed through after intense periods of expansion, somehow still like this actually felt a weight holding me down. Because my mind would obsess on it, it would think about it, wonder about it. And there wasn't a way to express that. And in the same way, I wanted to free myself from them. And it was really fun, and it is fun to have all these different kinds of things happening from time to time. But I was beginning to come to understand at this point in my life that what I was seeking was really beyond anything that the mind could comprehend. So in this period in my life, I was given a very, very stable situation. I had this job where I was working with seniors, trying to help them stay in their homes and not have accidents. Each day I'd receive an email of the people that wanted to have an appointment with me, and I would travel out in my hometown of Boulder in Denver. I was actually living in Longmont at this time, Colorado, nearby Boulder. And I would travel around and I'd meet with these seniors. And another thing that was really nice about this period of time is that I was really able to feel the love for so many different individuals, help them have confidence. We were talking a little bit earlier about that there are 7 primary states of consciousness, 7 levels to the body. And I was seeking to understand in a deeper way what these were. So we have our body, we have our breath, we have our mind, we have our intellect, and then a deeper level is the ego. And the ego is really like a bubble containing our individuality. And as you pass beyond that phase, the inner self is able to experience the connection between our inner self and the grand divine existence. And waking, dreaming, sleeping, we know so well. And we know a little bit in these 7 states of consciousness about this level of consciousness where insight can occur. It's a transitional state between waking, dreaming, sleeping. There's a part of our existence that is always awake and aware. And that transcendental state, transitional state, is what we begin to touch in the deepest experiences of our meditation, and also occasionally in our intuitive insights that can come before we wake in the morning. And I'd spent a lot of time, if you've had a chance to share and read some of the early videos which I've shared here, perhaps read a portion of my book, that I received a lot of insights into these areas. So as that level of life begins to become more solidified, the inner meditative state, the deep experience of existence, gradually the dream state and the dreamless state begin to become conscious. Every single one of us returns to the ocean. We return to the experience of the divinity every night when we sleep. But unfortunately, many of these stages are experienced unconsciously. What happens is that every single particle of this universe is returning consistently to the divinity. Every single particle of the existence. Where they accelerate the fine particles and they trace their movement to show, you'll find out that there's a moment where these little small minute particles actually blip out of existence and then they come back in a little bit later. Every single part of this creation is returning all the time. And in fact, if all the particles in our body all of a sudden did that at the same time, we would totally disappear. Fortunately, we don't do that. But in the same way, when we sleep at night, we are returning to that oneness unconsciously. And so the first establishment in higher states of consciousness happens when that unconscious state in sleep becomes conscious, and one maintains an awareness all the time. 24 hours a day, waking, dreaming, sleeping, the mind can stop, but there's still an awareness. It's a very subtle thing at first, very subtle. And as our meditation deepens, when we go to sleep at night, instead of like the lights being switched off, we could turn off all the lights in the house, the circuit breakers were gone, And then in the morning, it all comes back out like a movie coming out onto a projection screen. There's a sense of I am, I exist. And as that I amness becomes stronger and stronger, it becomes stabilized, and we are. Over the years, anytime I discovered my wife could say something to me, even though I was in the deepest sleep, I was there and could hear and see that, and then the mind would come back up. So there's a consistency. And this is known as the establishment of a cosmic state of consciousness. Cosmic because it's all-inclusive. We may not be able to have the intensity of that all-inclusive state or the depth of that to such an extent that the characteristics are fully seen at first, but gradually they are seen. Now, what are those characteristics? It's absolute in its nature, it's consciousness in its nature, and it is blissful, intensely blissful, unbelievably blissful. And it is a blissful state ultimately, which is far, far beyond anything that the mind could possibly conceive or the body could possibly experience. And as you're gradually touching to that, this is the bliss that you may experience and feel the presence in your deep meditation. But then that begins to gradually come out in the world and begin to be experienced. So there's a establishment of that cosmic state of awareness. And it can be talked about as an enlightened state. Yes, Sri never talked much about this. Maharishi did. But Maharishi would call this the suffering enlightened being. So in a sense, you do have the establishment of that presence, but the mind is still can be very caught up in this, that, and the other, bothered by so many different things in the world. Still, because the intensity of one of these qualities, which is Ananda, very deep, powerful bliss, isn't held onto in the mind in activity, and you're caught in this and that and the other. But this is a cosmic state. So in a certain sense, this state is a dual state. It's not a completed state. It's dual in the sense that the inner being is comprehended and stabilized, but then that's not in the world. You're experiencing it in yourself in more or less clear characteristics to enough that it's obvious that you're always awake, waking, dreaming, and sleeping. So this is not a completed state, but it is a very nice thing to have because the certainty of the inner being is now known. Now the world is also that, made of that. And the next stage in spiritual evolution is from cosmic consciousness, this fourth state of consciousness, to God consciousness. Now, of course, many people have many different and sometimes funny ideas about God. One culture will think of God as some guy that's up in the space looking down on us. This actually photograph here is from paintings that were done by Michelangelo on the roof of the Sistine Chapel. And the bigger picture of this is that God is at one end and man is at the other end, and they're meeting to touch. And in that touching, the presence of that divinity begins to be experienced. In a real sense, this picture can represent cosmic consciousness. The touch has been made, the connection has been made, but one doesn't yet see the full beauty of that. And so the phase of evolution from here is gradually the world begins to reflect the qualities of the divine inner being. The beauty, the love, the compassion, all of these wonderful qualities that we are an embodiment of in our best self, you begin to see and perceive. So the world, in a sense, in cosmic consciousness is flat where the inner awareness is present, but the outer world is seen as kind of separate from that. That separation begins to dissolve. And it isn't like one state happens and another state happens and one established, and it's a gradual process. The world becomes much more charming and beautiful. So during this phase of my life where I was traveling around to many of these individuals and helping them, many of them were very sick. They were in their homes. They were very afraid. They didn't want to go to a long-term care facility. I was given a wonderful opportunity to love them and encourage them and support them and do whatever I could to make them safe. Secretly, nobody knew I was given a chance to just bless them, totally bless them. Tell a few stories, make them laugh, make them feel safe, love them, and help them out. And very intensely, I was able to see this divinity. So God consciousness, what happens is you begin to see and respect how beautiful, how wonderful, how unbelievable, how sublime every single person is and how this world is. You could say, you could call this a celestial perception, if you will. Yes, there are energies around the body, yes, but in a certain sense, the consciousness established inside begins to fall into the wonderfulness of the creation. So I'm falling into the screen. Falling into the hearts and the love. A part of you would reach out and surround them. And even though we're talking to people all over the world here, I really can, consciousness really can be where you are and reach out and be with you. Because on the level of the heart, there is no separation in space. The depth of your heart and love is exactly the same as the depth of my heart and love. And so God consciousness is a process of uniting gradually with the beauty and the depth of that which is around you. I would also go to events. We had a very active singing kirtan group in Boulder, and I would go to those events a couple times a week. I'd go to the Yoga Journal. I would have big events up in Estes Park, Colorado, and I'd have a chance to go there to some of those. And so I was gradually moving in the direction of that God consciousness. And at the end of that process of God consciousness, there's a culmination in that. You could say the effulgent light scene of love, that is experienced. But that connection with everything and everyone begins to become stronger and stronger. And this is also the realm of the divine qualities. You could talk about them as the Devis, divine beings and creation. There are higher levels of this world and universe, and they parallel the 7 levels of our existence. They parallel the mind, so there's a realm of the mind, there's a realm of the memory, the intellect, the ego, and they also are parallel to the different elements of creation. The earth element, you know, it's physical. The water element is kind of related to this prana and life force. It moves out, it moves, it flows. The fire element, the mind and the memory, images, fire, knowledge. The air element is the realm of all of these wonderful divine qualities. And singing these kirtans, the music takes you into that space. So this is where the subtle qualities of the divine begin to become eminent, if you will. a relationship is created. And all of these qualities that are talked about in the Indian tradition and given a form in those traditions, Mother Divine, Ganesh, all of these are qualities of nature. And it's possible at this point that those kind of relationships can begin to be developed. And so there's a culmination in this state of experiencing the godliness and all around you. And that is when I guess you could say that you attract one of these Devic beings, and there's a personal quality and an impersonal quality to the godliness, God consciousness. Impersonal, abstract qualities that you experience, the love, the beautiful, but there can also be a very personal quality. And at some point, someone needs to come and say, okay, this is it. We need verification, don't we? And so there really is a moment where one of these divine qualities can come and appear before you or in you and say, okay, ding, this is it. Okay, I bless you. And that is a attainment of that state when that happens. Long before that kind of event happens, the immanence of the divine is known and experienced and felt. And people are unbelievably beautiful to that state of consciousness. And the hidden divine underneath the mind and the intellect, even the most difficult person who has done difficult things, we were still doing prison work, even the most frustrated individual, the consciousness has the ability to see through that. And in the same way you would transcend in meditation, you transcend on them, in them. And you go, oh, you look a little bit closer, you get a little bit closer, and you fall into that beautiful, beautiful quality inside of them. And at some point, apparently in the hierarchy, it's required that someone come and say, okay, now that's a reality. In all honesty and sincerity, nobody is more surprised than me, and nobody was more surprised than me when that happened to me. And at that time, I was given a blessing and a very specific, very holy gift, also a gift of something to meditate on, a special mantra associated with that. Mantras are very, very mysterious too. These are vibrations which embody the divine quality and can act as vehicles in our inner development. And they're in all the cultures. Honestly, I have many friends here now that are, I believe, maybe listening to me from Pakistan. So I have a lot of friends in Pakistan. This is very much a part of the Islamic tradition. Allah, Allah. That name La is a special word like this. La, love, la, 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 la. This is what a baby says, la, 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 la. So in this case, my experience began to move in that direction. So this period of my life that I was passing through a time to do that. And then another, I was given also something very special a couple of episodes back when I was in Rishikesh. I guess you could say something to help the process at this time. And I talked a little bit then about the lingas. You know, our form of our subtle body on the highest level of creation is like that. It's like the bubble, boo boo, the bubble. That's where I was taken, and that was the insight that I was given unbelievably long ago when I first came into contact with this unbelievable teacher here, he's founder of the Art of Living. I don't know why. I'm beginning to suspect now in the present day, but at this point, we're still a number of years away from where I'm at right now. God consciousness is quite real. And in this knowledge sheet, which I was reading about today, Shishri's talking about that. When the river meets the ocean, it recognizes the ocean, that it was the ocean from the beginning. The individual I dissolves in the one divinity. It dissolves over and over and over again until that experience is stronger than this little space of separateness. The whole story about the lingas are quite unusual. I didn't know what it was, but I received it in a very unusual way in Rishikesh. Fortunately, shortly after I returned from India that time, a pundit showed up. I had a personal pundit. These objects need to be enlivened, if you will. When I was at an event and meeting with individuals, some of the teachers in the area and around the United States that I'd come to know, I met a pundit, Anil Savikar, Punditji. He was a third-generation pundit, and actually it turns out they were pundits for the Shankaracharya of the North, which is where we're connected in our lineage. He was also a pundit with teacher of Swami Muktananda, who I had a connection with, talked about in the first book also. There are sacred objects, but every week here, the Art of Living founder, Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, does a special process called a rudram, very, very old. It's a special enlivenment invoking the energy of the linga. I'm not at that point in my life. I have this object. I have no idea what to do with it. And so the pundit shows up and he takes responsibility of every day, actually, for about 5 years. He did that. And I was really grateful that he was able to do that. Nobody knew much about it. I really didn't tell anybody. I wasn't interested in making a big deal of it. This conversation today was about my ongoing personal adventure, what I experienced in passing, some of the benefits I gained personally by being connected with this amazing organization. Now I know the rise of really a global force of good, a huge, powerful global force, the world teacher. There's never been anyone really like that. So I appreciate you coming and spending a few minutes with me here today. We'll continue these discussions and my interpretation, my explanation of the stages that I passed through in my experience. And when you're with people, just instead of so many words, just feel the presence of them and realize that what is in the depth of their heart is the same ocean that is driving this whole universe. And in your heart, walk gently, walk kindly, walk lovingly, walk with inspiration. And if you feel bothered by circumstances in your life, difficulties, hard times, realize there's a real purpose behind all of this. There really is. And if you could see the whole picture, and if you knew your back karma, every single thing that you go through is a chance for you to express the love that you are and to let go. So letting go is one of the really, really big lessons in this life. And letting go to the extent that you realize that there's nobody outside of you. There's nothing outside of you. It's all in the hearts of hearts. And that heart is the heart of the world. It's the life of the world. And it's what we're made of. We're made of that. So namaste, and as I always say, I'd like to explain these words. We say Jai Gurudev. It means may that divinity, may the insight of that understanding arise in you. It's not about some person. That grace principle of life is a force of nature, just like the wind and the sun and the moon and the stars. And may that awaken in you, and may we do the good that we've come to do in this world. Thank you very much.